While we didn't have to come far to reach the pinnacle of our magics, with our magics you can go far. Hello everyone, and welcome back down here to the Gamer's Den with me, your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire, at the final part of the spell portion for the 1st edition Pathfinder Paladin build guide. God, that could be a really good tongue twister. We are going to talk about the 4th level spells. Today's video is a little bit shorter for many reasons, not the least of which is that at 4th level you don't have quite as many spell slots. You do still get a decent number of them, but your spells here, you're gonna be hard pressed to find bad choices. It's going to be more degrees of what is most useful over the broadest range of situations that you'll find yourself in. But these ones that we have for you today are going to be pretty handy. But before we get into all of that, if you're new here to the channel, go on down there, hit the subscribe button, and become a regular member here at the Gamer's Den. Or if you've already gone on ahead and listed yourself on such an incredible roster of legendary heroes, then go on down, hit the like button, and share the video far and wide. But now, let's go ahead and start talking about your spell selection, not the least of which, the first one we have for you today is Holy Sword. With a standard action for 1 round per level, a melee weapon you touch becomes a +5 holy weapon that emits a magic circle against evil. This halts any existing enchantments on the weapon that it may have for the duration of this spell's effect. But this is still really great. I mean, absolutely handy, especially if you have a cold iron weapon or a silver weapon for any of those creatures that require that specific material, and that the weapon be holy or good aligned in order for it to overcome the target's damage reduction. This is a handy thing to have in your back pocket if for some reason your primary weapon is not specifically enchanted to deal with those kinds of threats. Not sure why it would be, but hey, we've all been in those situations where our weapon has been sundered. Then, the next spell is Burst of Glory. For a standard action, allies in a 10-foot radius centered on you get a +1 sacred bonus on attack rolls, saves versus fear, and temporary hit points per caster level, for a max of a +20 bonus. Now, being a paladin, especially if we don't have the trait that enhances our caster level, you're not going to hit that max +20 bonus unless there's some other circumstances or you've gone above level 20. But even still, like I'd mentioned before throughout previous portions of the spell guide, sacred bonuses, there's not a lot of different sacred bonuses overall, so that those will stack with a wide variety of other sources, making this a pretty good bonus to have. And at this point, this is going to be a sizable chunk of a bonus towards attack rolls. Saves versus fear, while maybe not the most difficult thing ever for several classes, it still is nice to have, especially for those who have lower will save scores. And every class will appreciate getting temporary hit points to help keep them alive and in the fight. But of course, there are more spells to go over. Why wouldn't there be? We have for us next Chains of Light. A standard action to afflict one target within 25 feet plus 5 feet every 2 levels with chains of light that paralyze them in place, blocking all forms of extra-dimensional travel. A reflex save is allowed each round to end the effect, but as a regular viewer and commenter Captain Crank had noted, once you're up in these higher levels, the number of creatures or targets that have poor reflex saves tends to stay pretty consistent, making this a reliable way of making sure an opponent is pinned down and in place. Just note, if a target is already ethereal or somehow mid-transport, this spell is not going to be able to work on them. If they're in any sort already extra-dimensional, they're not going to be affected by this. But if they're still on the material plane, they're still on the same plane as you, rather, they're not going to be able to shift or travel to other portions of the plane or other planes. So, this is great battlefield control, especially for that specific target that cannot get away, otherwise your lives could well end up being hell afterwards. Then we have Crusader's Edge. Touch a melee weapon as a standard action, giving it Bane versus Evil Outsiders, and on a crit, can nauseate them for 1d3 rounds. Now, a Fortitude save reduces this to Sicken for 1 round, but this is still great because this is a substantial bonus that will last for quite a while and be able to deal a significant amount of damage. And again, if you've got a build or an ally with a build that is focusing on widening their critical hit range, such as with a falchion or a scimitar or any weapon that has a substantive critical threat range, then you're going to get a lot of critical hits going and a lot of fortitude saves to avoid being nauseated. And even then, they're still going to be sickened afterwards, which is still a solid debuff to have. Not as good as nauseate, but overall, still pretty damn good all the way around. So with all of this, you can kind of see how these various spells are ideally suited to buffing and supporting. You're not really going to be doing a whole lot of throwing these spells down to attack your targets. Not a lot of them are ideally suited for that, and not all the buffs are created equal. For example, there's spells like Magic Siege Engine. Absolutely fantastic on paper. Probably not something that's going to come up a whole lot for you. I mean, a siege weapon, if it's a military-styled campaign, then maybe, but even then, you're still probably better off buffing your personal weapons overall and kind of letting the siege weaponry be in the background. Though, if you bring a ballista to a fight with a dragon, that can certainly be a good way to deal a significant chunk of damage to it. But it all just depends, as like I said, in certain contexts, some spells will absolutely shine. They'll be absolutely glorious. And so, because you're a prepared spellcaster with complete and total access to every spell on your list, I highly encourage you to go ahead and go through the list overall and just kind of see what's there. Because none of these episodes have been thoroughly, totally comprehensive with in-depth analysis on every single spell, comparing and contrasting. So it's worth it to read up a little bit. And also, just always remember, these guides are just that. They're just guides. They're just meant to help you understand the class a little bit more, see what's mechanically effective, and then go on ahead to build the character that you want to build. Sure, you don't want to be completely broken and useless, so you want to have some mechanical effectiveness, but the goal here is to more have fun and not build the most god-awful broken thing ever. Unless that's fun for you, then do that. But what do you think? Go on down to the comments below and let me know your thoughts. Did you like today's video? Did you dislike it? Hit those like or dislike buttons down below and let me know your thoughts on what spells you find to be particularly effective for the Paladin's 4th level spell list. And as always, if you're new here to the channel, go on down there, hit the subscribe button, and become a regular member here at the Gamers Den. But with all that said, I've been your host, Jordan, your Master of Lore and Storyteller Extraordinaire. Thank you all so very much for your time, and you all have yourselves a good night.